Valentine's Day is coming up soon, and it's a great time to kick up the romance in your marriage. But what about turning up the temperature in the smaller daily interactions with your spouse? Daily life may sometimes get in the way of the warmth, gentleness, and sweetness that we probably experienced more of when we were dating. So, today we're talking about how to make the best of your marriage by warming up your interactions with your spouse this winter. So, Dr. Kim, how would you define warmth in marriage?
Yeah, I think for me, it really comes down to acceptance of our spouse, to accept their thoughts, their feelings, their actions. It's letting them really be who God created them to be, not trying to change them
Hmm.
into who we want them to be. And I think when we do that, it gives our spouse this acceptance feeling that they're loved, they're accepted, they're cared for. They don't have to perform for us. They don't have to do certain things for us to love and care for them. And I just think that puts an atmosphere in a marriage that's very warm and then very conducive to growing, being a team, all the things that we talk about, because you are accepting each other just as you are and letting God make the changes in each of you that God desires to make.
That's so good. That's really good. I feel like that's something I hear you talk about a lot too, that maybe wasn't always something you did well.
No, I did not do well. No, I think and I think Nancy and I are both guilty. I think we approached it different ways. I
Mhm.
think mine was probably more damaging, really, because I just try to put her in this box, and so I would reinforce things I like and be very negative about things I didn't like, which is a way of
Mm,
manipulation. Really, it's a kind of
mm,
gaslighting. It's kind of like, okay, if you do this, I'm gonna go, yay, you're so good, and if you
mhm.
don't, I'm gonna go, what is wrong with you? And
Oh,
uh, so yeah, I think it's learning that there's value in the differences, which we talk about, and I think that's so hard for us sometimes because we think, well, if they would just do this or that, but when you accept the differences with each other, accept their thoughts, feelings, actions, all those things, then you really can see how God is using this other person to grow you, to strengthen you, to help you
mm.
be more of who He created you to be.
Wow, that's good. That's really good. Um, yeah, I think it's like letting your spouse be the person that they are, not the person you kind of imagine.
Yes. And that's why I tell couples or singles really when we're meeting, I said, don't put on an air for somebody. Don't
Mm.
try to be somebody you're not. Because if they like that person that you're not, you're stuck with that. Now you got
Yeah,
to perform the rest of your life. I said,
yeah.
be who you are. You want someone that can love and care for you. The longer you are in a relationship, the longer you date, they see your warts, they see everything, and they still say, oh my gosh, this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. And so you don't want to perform or try to be somebody you're not.
That's so good. That's really good. I feel like one of the things that made me think about this topic that we were talking about today is there's this it's kind of exactly what you're describing, but in our home, in my marriage, we have just like such a different personality,
Mhm.
such two different personalities that kind of the way we interact sometimes is like, okay, well, I'll give the example that probably is relatable to a lot of people right now. So with working from home, like after kind of our rhythms shifted and changed during like the whole past couple years, I've always worked from home, but Brian goes to meetings and goes out, meets with people.
Sure.
So in doing less of that, we're together more. And so our work styles and our approach is really different because our personality is different. Our work like task list is very different. Most of the things he does are a little more collaborative or social. And I'm like, see, I got these headphones on. Don't talk to me.
Leave me alone.
It's a signal. Don't talk to me. I'm busy. And so to him, that feels really cold. Sometimes that feels like I'm not available or there for him, which I'm not available, but he feels, like that is not a conducive atmosphere for our relationship. And so we're trying to talk about how to have like, okay, we can both have our way of doing things or approaching things. We can both have our own sort of requirements, but still also bridge that gap to where I'm not putting these on because I don't like you. I'm putting these on because it's, time for something else. So this is kind of right at the heart of what you're talking about, Dr. Kim.
That's so good. Yeah, I
Mhm,
know. And so Brian feels like, oh, she's got this wall around her now.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I think probably in some relationships, and I've seen it, and we see teenagers do it all the time. You put your headphones on so you can block out everything else. You
Right,
do
right,
want to escape from the world. So it's not like
right,
he's way in left field thinking that.
right.
But I think, yeah, and so I think it's great that he told you one. And I think two, that you
Mhm.
guys are trying to figure it out. Maybe when you're
Yeah.
doing that, you make a big sign that says, "I love you, Brian," and set it in front
Yeah.
of you. And
Right.
then he, oh yeah, she does love me. She's working right now or something. But
Yeah. I'll put a smiling picture on the front of the card so he
that's
doesn't
right.
have to see my business face. Yeah, that's true. That's really good. And I think that's like getting it on the table is the hard part,
It
right?
is, and
Mhm.
I just think what Brian did is a great example for guys. I mean, he didn't
Mm,
yell and scream at you. He just
mhm.
said, "Hey, this is affecting me. Can we talk about
Yes.
it?" In
Yeah.
essence, and so that's what when we can get to that point in our marriage, it's so good because
Mhm.
you're saying, "Hey, this is something that affects me, making me feel like I don't want to feel. Can we talk about it?"
Yeah.
And that's great,
Yeah. That's good. And I mean, it's not without its kinks. We're working it out still because we're,
right?
still doing it. But I think that's a good encouragement too. I think for those of us who are maybe not quite as far down the path as you and Nancy are, is the fact that we're talking about it is a win already instead of just
Absolutely.
being angry about it.
Yeah, Brian's not stuffing it until someday
Mhm.
you're on and we're recording and this monster comes up, this incredible
Yeah.
Hulk behind you,
Right.
and is tearing things up. So yeah, you don't want
Right.
that
No,
to
that's
happen.
good. That's good.
Exactly.
So how would warmth shape our interactions with our spouse? How will that affect how we relate?
I don't think any of us want somebody to come into our life and change me and change us into the person they want us to be. Or
Mhm.
I want someone in my life that loves me and accepts me. And so I want Nancy to accept those thoughts, feelings, and actions. I want to be able to tell her everything without feeling
Mhm.
I'm going to be judged, because when you feel like you're going to be judged, you hold back. I'm not going
Mhm.
to say this because I'm going to get jumped on or ridiculed or whatever. So I want Nancy to be able to love me as I am and be willing to let God make the changes in me that God wants to make, and me do the same thing for her. So I think it changes our interactions because it's come to that acceptance,
Mhm.
and so it takes the maybe anxiety out, maybe it takes
Mhm.
some communication barriers out. It just there's something about someone that just loves us as we are that draws us to that person.
Oh, that's good. That's so
You
true.
know,
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. And I think you can think of like some of the people I think of as having been the warmest people I've been around are probably like I think of like my grandparents. And I
Mm,
think, with your parents, maybe there's a lot of teaching and discipline. Grandparents just there to love you, and you
yes.
can feel that. It feels warm.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things I've loved about being a grandparent is that you can
Mhm.
just totally unconditionally love those kids,
Mhm.
and you're a safe place for them. And,
Mhm.
as my oldest ones have gotten older, I think we established good relationship because they'll talk about sex and other things to me. And I'm thinking, "Oh, my kids didn't talk about this with me."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. You can see it's a great example of, I think, where we see it really play out in the
Mhm.
grandparent child grandchild relationship.
Yeah, I love that, and I love too that you just said, like, being a safe place because I think being a safe place for our spouse, that's a great target,
Mm.
um, and I think that helps that's kind of a good mental image to help us hold on to, like, what are we aiming for here, you know?
Exactly. And, a lot of people go to work in places that they don't really like the job, or it's
Mhm,
a bad atmosphere, or it's toxic. But if they come home and your spouse and that is your safe place and your refuge and where you get recharged, I mean, that's what we want in our marriages. And I've
mhm,
had many people tell me I can endure now that our marriage is better, work's easier. Because before work was bad, home was bad. Now home's good and I can't wait to get home, and I'm okay with going to work the next day.
oh, that's good, that's
Yeah.
really good, I love that. Mhm, that's cool. So, okay, so I'm I'm curious about this next one. What does it look like when a couple is cold toward each other?
It's interesting in the counseling room. I can tell when a couple comes in and sits down. I mean, you can sometimes I want to put on a coat because it's so
Mm.
cold in there,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
icy. But you don't see any. I think in the couples that are there no connection. So
Mhm.
that's like you can see I've seen a couples together, like maybe at gatherings or things like that, and I know they're married, but you would never could tell it by the way you look at them, because it's just there's no connection there. They're kind of existing together. There's no interaction. It's like there's two strangers.
Mm,
And I think those are the things that happen when that warmth is not there. We just
mhm,
begin kind of existing with each other. Maybe we're not at the point where we're going to leave the marriage, leave the relationship, but I'm just going to live my own life and, you know, go on about it. And we're
mhm.
strangers. And that's so sad because you're missing out so much. A couple one time years, quite a few years ago, but they had a two-story house, which they didn't need after the kids moved out, but they decided to keep it because he moved upstairs. So
Oh,
he
wow.
had his own little suite upstairs and she had the downstairs, and they
Mm,
never ate together. Their schedules, they both worked out of the home. Maybe there were days they didn't really see each other, even though they were sleeping in the same house. And it was just so sad. I mean, on one hand, it worked. They didn't fight, but it was like, two people didn't know each other renting an apartment together, a
mhm.
two-bedroom apartment together,
Oh,
where
that's so sad.
it's efficient. It's good. We're saving money this way, but, we never talked to each other.
Yeah. Oh, that's sad. You never nobody wanted to end up like that, That was not anybody's
No,
dream for marriage.
no, no. When I do primary counseling, we talk about where they want to be in 5 years or 10 years. No, it's never. Yeah, I want to be so distant from my spouse that I can't even remember their middle name.
Right.
You don't want to go there.
No. No. So it's that lack of connection. It's like roommates, it's just existing. There's no fun, no joy, no togetherness.
Yeah, and I think it's, couples. I see some couples that on the surface do that pretty well. Nobody would
Mm,
really know.
mhm,
I sometimes I hate it that I can pick up some things in people, but
mhm,
just the way it goes, I guess it's a gift God gave me. And so they're not, a lot of times they're not fighting and doing all those kind of things. They're just not doing anything to connect or to draw them closer
mm,
together. The two become one. It's just not happening.
mhm. Okay. So what I'm hearing you say too is that conflict is not a deal breaker when you're talking about warmth and connection,
No.
but a lack of conflict doesn't mean things are going great.
It, great. Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm,
And I think we all going to have conflict, and
mhm,
we've talked about that in another podcast. But um, conflict, when we learn how to resolve it and respect each other as we're working things out, for Nancy and I, it really grows our marriage because we've
mhm,
got something resolved, we've got something solved, and we're able to not let that bog us down or stay stuck there.
mhm. Yeah, and so that makes me think of too, like how I think a lot of times the work of kind of dealing with hard stuff feels so hard that it feels safer or easier to ignore a problem. But really by doing that, you risk sort of icing things over between you,
Right.
you know.
Right. And I think that's good. Just as you said that, it made me think, I think some couples just kind of evolve into that then.
Hmm.
We're not resolving problems. It makes us a little distant because we haven't resolved this. You kind of pull away from each other. And most of these don't happen one thing at a time. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not like just today we are so close and warm, and tomorrow it's like we're, living in igloos in the same house.
Right.
It's usually a gradual thing, and we look up one day and realize, oh my gosh, we are so disconnected.
Hmm. Yeah. So why do we need to pay attention to the temperature in our marriage?
Oh, I think it's a good gauge of the state of our relationship.
Hmm.
If there's warmth between Nancy and I, and unless neither one of us hide things very well. We're pretty things written all over face, things like that. So when that
Hmm.
warmth is there in our marriage, I'm confident that things are good. She's
Hmm.
fine with me and what things are, and we've gotten over time learning to keep short accounts. In other words, if something bothers us, to get it on the table quickly so we
Hmm.
can deal with it and move on from it instead of letting it build up. Because when you have something bothers you, you don't really discuss it, it is going to affect you. It's going to be a snide remark. It's going to be a body language thing. There's going to be something that conveys not warmth, but I'm upset. So it's so much better to get it on the table and deal with it. So I think for people, know if right now, if you feel really warm, like we're talking about today, accepted, loved by your spouse, that's a really good sign. And if you're not, it's a sign that we probably need to work on something. We don't, maybe we're in the very beginning of it, or maybe it's gone way too far. It's never too late. You had it
Hmm.
at one time, you can have it again.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I love too that what you said, you just said that it's a we thing. We need to work on this. and
Yes.
not like kind of like what we talked at the beginning of the podcast, not coming in and going, hey, you need to stop XYZ. You need to
Right.
fix this, but
Right.
we want to build this together. That's a really good shift.
Right. Brian, if you would just put on your mask and go to the
Right.
office, we wouldn't have this problem.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. I think the problem is his office is pretty lonely. So he wants
Yes,
somebody
I
to
can
to
imagine.
bother. So no, that's good. So how can we warm it up and show more kindness, gentleness, and goodwill toward our spouse? Are there any practical ways or unexpected ways to do this?
You know, what really helps me is to be empathetic with Nancy, to take the time to say, what does this look like from her point of view? And how is that different from mine? And try to understand what's going on. And that allows me to come at it in a different way, because I'm valuing whatever she is doing, thinking, whatever it is,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to understand her. And so when I do that, I think she appreciates that. She realizes that I do care. I'm not just blowing things off or blowing her off. And so I think that just beginning to look at empathetic with your spouse and realize what they're going through. You know, like if maybe Nancy that evening and she just wasn't overly warm to me, but maybe it's because she's got some things going on in her business or one of the kids or something that we haven't really talked about yet, and it's bothering her. And so trying to see, okay, what's going on with her, asking her some questions, or maybe I already know, and being empathetic and kind with that. I mean, her job is not to entertain me every night.
Mhm.
And I used to think it was.
I can see how that would go awry.
Yeah, it didn't last too long. But I
Yeah.
think the other thing, I think when we listen well to our spouse, that helps a lot. You know, when you and Brian are talking, you know if he's listening or not, and I mean, you just do. I mean, we learned how to check out by looking at somebody when we were teenagers, when our parents were lecturing us. We're just like, as soon as they quit, I am out of here. I'm looking her in the eyes now,
Yeah.
but as soon as this is over, I'm out of here.
They're just totally dead behind
Yes,
behind
yeah.
the eyes. Yeah.
It's like nobody's home in there.
Yeah.
So listening well, and I think one thing that really helps is asking God every day to help him see your spouse through his eyes.
Mhm.
When I take time to do that, it totally changes the way it takes my preconceived ideas or whatever out of the way and lets God show me what's going on with my wife. How do I
Mhm.
serve Nancy today? What do I do to make her feel loved and cared for? I don't do that perfect, but when I do it, and it's really sad that I know what to do and I don't always do it, but I don't. And when I do, I see the difference it makes. And when I don't, I see the difference it makes.
Mhm. So, are you telling me that counselors are human also?
I
You
think
tell me
so.
that? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
yes, yes. That's what I tell people.
Right.
I was a pretty crazy, wild college guy and stuff before I became a counselor. There's, now I learned, God's used a lot of that in the counseling room because I can understand people, because people look at me now and they think, well, you've always just been in love with
Mhm.
God, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, well, I am now, but I still probably wouldn't want you to know everything that goes on in my head
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
those kind of things.
Absolutely. Well, there's hope for the rest of us then.
Yes, yes. Counselors are human, very human.
Okay, thank you. Um, so when we think about warmth and like, you suggested putting a little sign, the happy sign in front of me when I'm working and when my
Yep.
face doesn't look warm. But I think a couple ways that we've started to work through this are just kind of going out of the way. Like for me, saying, "Hey, I'm going to go into my work mode right now." And so I won't be able to talk for a while, and just sort of being really clear about this is not something, there's nothing between us. I'm just going to not
Yeah,
respond for a
that's good.
while.
Yeah.
So trying to be a little more proactive in communication and set up those expectations has been helpful for us.
I think it's great because then Brian is not wondering anything. You've told him what you need, what you're going to do, and
Mhm.
what you need. You're
Mhm.
not going to take it personal,
Mhm.
and it allows you to do what you need to do and not be distracted.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, so trying to look for those sort of like pain points before they blow up in our face,
Yeah,
has helped us.
that's really good.
And then one other thing that's been helpful is just sort of looking for how to speak each other's love language, just looking
Mm.
for ways to like, communicate in a way that I wouldn't really think to, but you have to think how, like you're saying, Dr. Kim, the empathy of how to communicate with them in a
Yeah,
way that lands.
I'm glad you brought up love languages because what I've seen over the last couple of years is, I mean, love languages is so common. Most couples that I see in counseling know what love languages are.
Mhm.
Most of them know what their love language is and their spouse's love language. And probably 90% of them don't do it.
Mm.
And for all kinds of different reasons. It's like, well, it's too hard. Mine's too different than hers, and that's not mine. Hers should be mine. I'm serving her every day. That should let her know I love you. I love her, but she's saying, but mine's quality time, and it's not the same. You're serving me, it's not the same. And so I think the love language is a great tool, but it becomes an excellent tool when we use it. When I
Yeah.
know that Nancy's
Yeah.
is quality time, and I make sure we have time every day and that we have a date on the weekend and the things that really are important to her, or she knows that mine's words of affirmation. And so she says, thank you about everything. She encourages me. She said, so, I mean, you've got to follow through with it. You can't just know it and then not do anything about it and
Yeah.
expect things to get better.
Yeah. No, that's huge. That's a huge key. I
Yeah.
think one pushback I've heard some on the idea of love languages, which I find it really helpful, but I've heard some spouses say, I don't believe in that because we should all be loving like Jesus loved. What's your thought on that?
I think it's interesting that if you look through Jesus' life, he did love everybody, but he treated people different. He told one
Mhm.
guy, Starling, get up and walk. Other people, he would bring the children to me because he knew they needed that touch and closeness with him. So I think Jesus was probably the master at knowing what people needed and what their love language was. Could he
Mhm.
do all of them? Yes. Can we do all of them? Yes. But knowing what really resonates with the person in front of us is what really makes the difference. I don't know if that
Mhm.
answers, but that's kind of what came to my mind.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. So Jesus obviously has a lot of attributes we will not have. So
No.
we need to be looking for help and be wise and not proud.
Yeah, he really did meet people where they were,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know. She,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm. That's good. So, what are some ways you've seen some of this work? I mean, you've touched on this some, but what are some ways you've seen this work in your marriage or with couples you've counseled?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and I think for a lot of us, selfishness is an issue that we fight a lot. We just
Mhm.
we're vulnerable to it. Still get vulnerable to it at times, like probably some every day. And so I think the way it works, I think you have to be very intentional about doing the things that are going to make your spouse feel loved and cared for. I think anytime we're praying with and for our spouse, I think that's a huge thing that draws us close together and
Mhm.
creates warmth and a connection because we're really consciously putting God in the middle of our marriage. And then I think for me, just what does God want me to do today as a spouse? And if
Mhm.
I'm open to his, I mean, I may pray that prayer in the morning and nothing comes to me, but during the day, there may be a prompt. Then I've got a choice. Do I go to that prompt knowing that most likely it's from God answering my prayer, or do I
Mhm.
ignore it? And if I go through with it, I usually see really good results because he's given me an opportunity. He's showing here's an opportunity to show
Mhm.
Nancy you love her, you accept her, you care for her, and it's going to create warmth.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. So it's that encouragement to just keep being intentional and just keep following through.
I think so, and I think it's so easy for us to get lazy. For me, to get lazy.
Mhm.
There's times that honestly, there's times I come home and I think this is what I need to do, and I think I don't want to do that tonight. And
Yeah.
sometimes I can say, okay, God, I got to have your strength to help me do this tonight. And some nights I just blow it, and I just,
Mhm.
I'm just selfish, and hopefully that those become less and less over time, and I think they are. But
Mhm.
but I think we all have to fight that at times. And our spouse, if we've committed that person to live in a covenant for the rest of our lives, then I want to make it as good as I can for Nancy, and hopefully
Mhm.
she wants it to make it as good as she can for me, and that means sacrifice on both of our parts at times.
Mhm.
But the end result's worth it
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
End is always worth it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and really it is really that simple, but not that easy, to avoid becoming those two strangers living in the house.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but you kind of know what to do. You just have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
Mhm.
some things just happen. Maybe someone has a fight and the other sleeps in the other room for one night, and then they decide, I don't have to listen to his snoring tonight, or whatever, or I don't have to listen to her toss and turn all night. And so you keep
Mhm.
doing it and you think, well, that's the first step of away from warmth, I think, and away from
Mhm.
closeness. Now, if there's health
Mhm.
reasons, I get that, but not just where it starts out as a fight and then you decide, oh, it's just easier this way.
Right. Yeah. It's just that little wall starting to get built.
Yes, exactly.
Mm. Okay, so if this is something we've never thought about, if we haven't really thought about the climate or the tone of our marriage, where should we start?
Probably God.
Mhm.
It's probably just, hey, God, I need to be who you want me to be as a spouse.
Mm.
I want that more warmth. I heard this podcast and Dr. Kim and Lindsay were talking about warmth in a marriage, and I don't think I've done a pretty good job doing my part. And so,
Mm.
first, I think you've got to point the finger at yourself. What do you need to do? What does God want you to do? And allow Him to mold you. And then you go to your spouse, and I would go to Nancy and say, I want to ask for your forgiveness.
Mhm.
I have done things. I've been selfish. I probably still will be again, but I want you to know I'm working on this, and I
Mhm.
hope to catch it quickly. And I want to continue to make our marriage as much as I can something that is really a great place for you to be, a safe place, a warm place where you totally feel loved and accepted. And if you don't feel that from me, I give you permission to call me out on it. It's
Mm.
okay to call me out on it. And then I'll
Mhm.
take it to God and I'll say, this is another piece. We got to work on God.
Mhm. That's good. So I'm hearing us start with a lot of humility and just
Yeah.
start with that.
Yeah. And I think it's hard. I mean, humility, I
Mhm.
think for a lot of us is hard because it doesn't, I don't know, we have this image of what your men in the workforce, women in the workforce, we don't
Mhm.
hear a lot about humility, although I think the people you see that are humble stand out like a shining light. But I
Mhm.
don't think it comes easy. And so, to me, the first place I've got to be humble is before God. And if I'm humble for Him, I think He helps me be humble before the people that are important in my life.
Mm. That's good. That's really good. So if you're to go to your spouse with this, have you seen that go pretty well for people and for yourself, or have you seen that go over like a ton of bricks?
Of just going to,
Yeah, that apology piece of coming and saying this. I haven't done this well. I'd like to do
yeah,
better.
that's very hard.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple where a few months ago, the husband did just that, and
Mm.
I think I think what she saw in him, I think her her love grew as she was watching him, hearing him say those words.
Hmm.
I think we get scared of it. I think as men, okay, somebody's going to take my man card away if I'm act humble toward my
Mm.
wife, which is such a lie. And I think you take that step in faith
Mm-hmm.
that this is what God wants me to do. This is what I need to do. And I think the response to your spouse is going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be great. And you're going to say, I can do this. Wasn't easy. Might not be easy next time, but I can do this because it makes such a difference in my marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's a really huge growth point right there.
I think it is. And we all get not humble for a lot of different reasons, but
Mm-hmm.
most of it for me always goes back to being selfish.
Yeah.
I want it my
Yeah.
way.
I feel like that's a huge key here. And I feel like um, it's something that keeps coming back over and over. So maybe that's kind of the core of, if we're not loving our spouse intentionally in the way that speaks their language, we're just not thinking of them and not valuing them as much.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, that's
And
great.
then probably they're not going to value us as much eventually.
Mm,
And that's
mhm,
not good.
mhm. Or it's gonna be harder for them
It's not what
to.
we want. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Well, Dr. Kim, this has been really helpful, talking about being warmer towards our spouse. Do you have any final piece of advice on this topic?
Well, I hope it convicted me some,
Mm,
honestly,
mhm,
preparing for it, talking about it today. And so I would just say to those people who are listening today, think about that. How warm is your relationship with your spouse? What is the atmosphere? Is your home, are you a safe place for your spouse? And if you come up uh, that you're not, then it's time to begin to work on that. And maybe you rate it and you say, well, I am a 7 out of a 10. Well, then say, what would it take to make that a 10? But just it's
mm.
something like you said, Lindsay, we have to be intentional. We got to continue to work on. And when we do, it makes a huge difference.
That's good. That's really good. And you know what I'm thinking as you're saying that, Dr. Kim? I'm thinking of how you said that you can pick up these things from couples. And I'm thinking of how like our kids can pick up the tone and the temperature in the house.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so the impact of raising that warmth is not just contained to the two spouses in a marriage, you know?
Right. It's going to be all over your
Yeah.
home.
It's gonna be
And,
all over.
and I think other people notice it.
Mhm.
I think, that come into your house, your good
Mhm.
friends that come to the house. It is something that unfortunately can be unique, and other people
Mhm.
don't see it. And so it gives us a real opportunity, I think, as Christians to kind of model
Mhm.
something for other people.
Oh, that's really cool. That's
Yeah.
super encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, it's been really fun to talk about warmth. And as I'm sitting here in
Yes.
my turtleneck sweater, because it's really cold where I am. So if you like the podcast, if you've enjoyed this week's episode, please do us a favor. Go ahead and leave a rating and review of the podcast wherever you listen. I'm going to re-say that. That was a little bit
Okay.
tongue-tied. So if you've enjoyed this episode and you like the podcast, please do us a favor today. Leave us a rating and review of the podcast wherever you listen. It's a real gift to us when you do leave that review. And most importantly, it helps more couples find the show so that they can begin working on warming up their marriage as well. Next week, we're talking about the idea of team language in marriage. What is team language? It's a great way to approach some of the changes we talked about today. So if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We love chatting with you and we answer all of our emails. So email us at info@awesomemarriage.com. Have a great day and do something awesome for your marriage today.